The carry-on film opens with a mysterious figure, whose name is never revealed, but who is referred to as the Traveler. He enters an inconspicuous Christmas tree shop. The man who works there explains that acquiring the unidentified object, which is not yet revealed, was far more expensive due to heightened security from the Border Patrol. He therefore expects a high payment. The Traveler places a black bag containing a large amount of cash on the table. The man then puts a car key in return, instructing the Traveler to find the object in the trunk of a blue BMW. As soon as the Traveler's job is done, he murders both men in cold blood and burns down the entire place. The Traveler finds a black suitcase in the trunk. Ethan Kopech, who has worked at LAX as a TSA agent for 3 years, has had a lackluster career. His ambition was to become a police officer, but unfortunately, he was rejected. Ever since then, he has been on autopilot, except when he's with his girlfriend, Nora, who works as a manager at the same airport and whom he loves very much. The couple is also expecting a baby. They board a bus, and Nora gently steers the conversation toward his career, as she knows he doesn't enjoy what he's doing. She playfully adds that she had rejected him a couple of times before finally going on a date with him, so he shouldn't give up after one try. Ethan remains silent. They reach LAX and return to their respective posts. Ethan, as usual, arrives late to his job, and his superior is clearly displeased. Law Enforcement Officer Williams informs the crew that they have received an order from the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. This order mandates the issuance of counterfeit pens to the crew to prevent fraudulent boarding passes. The crew is instructed to contact LEO if they encounter any suspicious situations. Ethan's friend advises him to improve his punctuality and focus on his work, emphasizing that he now has a child to consider. His friend reminds Ethan that he has already received a promotion, despite arriving after Ethan. Determined, Ethan musters his courage and requests a promotion from his supervisor. As expected, his superior points out his tardiness, expressing doubts about his commitment to the job. Undeterred, Ethan argues his case, emphasizing his suitability for the role. He confidently states that he can identify fraudulent boarding passes more effectively than even the LEO, law enforcement officer. To further solidify his position, Ethan's friend generously offers to relinquish his spot at the machine, allowing Ethan to demonstrate his abilities. Meanwhile, a white van arrives at the airport. Inside, a man is bound to a chain, marking the introduction of a character known as Watcher. Watcher then proceeds to breach the airport's security camera system. Ethan receives the counterfeit pen from the officer and assumes his position at the machine. He begins scanning the items diligently. The Traveler we met at the beginning is now seeking an update from the Watcher. However, a complication arises. Jason, Ethan's friend, was supposed to be stationed at the machine scanning area, but they spot Ethan instead. To ensure Jason's cooperation, they decided to blackmail him, leveraging his personal life. But the Watcher quickly uncover Ethan's address and learn he has a girlfriend and a baby on the way, which he relays on to the Traveler. Meanwhile, a customer approaches Ethan, handing him an earpiece and explaining that it doesn't belong to her. Ethan takes it, intending to place it in the lost and found box, but his phone buzzes with a sudden text message. "Put it on." Hesitant but curious, he complies. As soon as the earpiece is in place, a voice crackles to life. The Traveler's voice. Calm but threatening, the Traveler issues a chilling ultimatum. Ethan must let a specific bag pass through the scanner without alerting anyone. If he fails, his girlfriend will die. Ethan is in disbelief as the voice on the earpiece continues. The Traveler calmly instructs him to allow a man wearing a red cap, heading for Northwind Flight 1850, which is set to depart at 5:40 p.m., to pass through security unchecked. When Ethan nervously asks what's in the man's bag, the Traveler dismisses the question, stating coldly that it's none of his concern. The next revelation leaves Ethan even more shaken. The Traveler begins listing his friend Jason's home address and details about his family, including the fact that Jason has twins. The threat is clear. Desperate, Ethan subtly attempts to call 911, hoping to alert someone to the situation. However, the Watcher, monitoring his every move, quickly informs the Traveler. The Traveler responds with a chilling warning. His men have a rifle trained on Ethan's pregnant girlfriend, ready to fire if he disobeys. Panicked, Ethan immediately ends the call. Following orders, Ethan locks his phone in a drawer, his hands trembling. Meanwhile, Detective Elena arrives at the Christmas tree shop to investigate the deaths of Oleg Vedenyapin and his nephew shot dead by the Traveler. They also find out they are Bratvas. The detective also recovered a watch which Oleg was wearing at the time of his death. Elena carefully pry open the back to find an ATF bug, which the bureaucracy of alcohol, tobacco, firearms and explosives agency used to spy on the criminals, and this chip can hold up to 72 hours long of recording. She decides to send this watch to her good friend and a police officer who is good at this stuff. The crowd is alive with festive energy as Christmas Eve celebrations are in full swing. Amid the chaos, Ethan discreetly attempts to use his smartwatch to send an SOS message. However, nothing escapes the watcher's vigilant eyes, and Ethan is forced to abandon the attempt, reluctantly putting the device away. The Traveler, seemingly enjoying the power dynamic, begins revealing personal details about Ethan's life. He casually mentions that Ethan's father worked as a private security guard at a mall, while his mother is a teacher. Ethan is left perplexed, wondering how the Traveler managed to access such specific information about him. Meanwhile, Elena brings the damaged ATF chip to a friend/colleague known for his expertise in retrieving data. After carefully analyzing the chip, the officer manages to recover fragments of audio, though much of it is badly degraded. What he does uncover is alarming. The ATF had been spying on Oleg, who was involved in selling firearms to Russian buyers. The Traveler finally reveals a critical piece of information. He is a freelancer, someone who takes on jobs to get them done for his clients. No questions asked. Ethan, desperate for answers, watches as the Traveler casually lounges in a chair nearby, snacking as if he's completely in control of the situation. Summoning his courage, Ethan shuts off the scanner and asks a passenger for their boarding pass. On the boarding pass, he quickly scribbles details about the Traveler's identity and discreetly hands it to a law enforcement officer, LEO, under the guise of routine security protocol. The officer glances at the note, immediately understanding the gravity of the situation, and heads off to summon backup. But the Traveler, always one step ahead thanks to the Watcher, senses that something is off. Before the officer can act, the Traveler stealthily injects him with a syringe containing a fast-acting agent, triggering a fatal heart attack. The Traveler issues a cold warning. If he tries anything like that again, his men will not hesitate to shoot Nora, his pregnant girlfriend. Ethan's superior unexpectedly reassigns him to his original post near the metal detector area, disrupting the Traveler's plan. The Traveler, through the earpiece, warns Ethan that failing to return to his designated position will result in deadly consequences. Thinking quickly, Ethan devises a risky plan. He mixes alcohol into a coffee and swaps Jason's drink with the tampered one. Soon enough, the superior smells alcohol in Jason's coffee and immediately fires him on the spot. As Jason leaves, he gives Ethan a sharp, knowing look, as if he's aware Ethan orchestrated his downfall. Ethan reluctantly allows the bag to pass through the scanner without raising any alarm. Meanwhile, Officer Elena, still piecing together the fragmented audio from the ATF chip, stumbles upon a critical word: Novichok. Recognizing it as a deadly neurotoxic chemical infamously used in Russian chemical warfare, Elena immediately contacts Homeland Security. After the bag passed through, Ethan returns the boarding pass to the Traveler's associate named Mateo. The act weighs heavily on him, and as soon as he gets a chance, he rushes to the restroom to vomit. In disbelief and consumed by guilt, Ethan struggles to process the gravity of the situation. The Traveler is ready to kill 250 innocent passengers on a plane, and yet he shows no remorse. As Ethan composes himself, the Traveler reveals the danger of the deadly chemical Novichok, how even a small amount could cause someone to drown in their own blood. Meanwhile, Agent John from the Department of Homeland Security arrives at the precinct to review Elena's findings. However, both Elena's captain and the agent are skeptical of her conclusions, as they are based on a single distorted word. The tension escalates when her colleague interrupts, informing her that a 911 call had been placed from inside LAX, registered under Ethan Kopech, a TSA officer working at the Northwind terminal. Alarmed by this new development, Agent John and Elena decide to head to the terminal immediately. The police arrive at the Northwind terminal to investigate the potential threat, heightening the tension in the bustling airport. Ethan's superior, trying to maintain order, informs the crew that they will conduct random security checks on 50 passengers as a precautionary measure. Seizing an opportunity, Ethan secretly accesses the scanner, logs in using his superior's credentials, and manually flags Mateo, the traveler's associate, for inspection. Moments later, the public address system announces Mateo's name, instructing him to report to security. The traveler, ever watchful and suspicious, immediately deduces that Ethan is behind the disruption. Furious, he keeps his eye on Ethan, who, overwhelmed by fear and guilt, decides to run to save his girlfriend. As Ethan reaches her, he notices a red laser dot tracing her body, a sniper's aim. Nora confronts him, her voice laced with betrayal. She demands to know if he was responsible for Jason's sudden dismissal, expressing disbelief that he would stoop so low. Before Ethan can respond, the traveler's voice cuts through his earpiece, cold and menacing. He warns Ethan that if he utters even a single word, Nora will be shot on the spot. With a heavy heart, Ethan backs away, swallowing his words, as the threat against her life looms large. The tension escalates as the traveler corners Ethan in the bathroom, unleashing a brutal attack. A vicious fight ensues, with Ethan struggling to defend himself. In a desperate move, Ethan grabs a gun, pointing it at the traveler, and demands that he call off the snipers targeting Nora. The traveler, unfazed, pulls out his phone. Instead of calling off the snipers, he activates a much more sinister threat, the weapon, set to detonate in just 10 minutes. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Ethan races to stop the explosion. However, when he reaches the location, he finds his superior with Mateo, the traveler's associate. The traveler, from an earpiece, encourages Ethan to shoot him if he wants to prevent the weapon from detonating. Ethan hesitates, torn between saving the lives of countless people and preserving his moral compass. His reluctance to kill ultimately costs him as Mateo, with cold efficiency, kills Ethan's superior. Mateo then reveals a shocking truth. Like Ethan, he is just another pawn in the traveler's hidden agenda. Mateo's husband has been taken hostage, and under threat of harm, he's been forced to obey the traveler's orders. Ethan, with the help of the traveler, manages to defuse the weapon after a tense and difficult struggle. The device is deactivated. As Elena and Agent John make their way to the airport, Elena receives a call from her colleague back at the precinct. The colleague informs her that LAX has sent over a list of high-profile individuals, 4 Marines who need to testify in court. However, the conversation takes a disturbing turn when Elena learns that Agent John is supposed to arrive at the precinct later, suggesting that someone is impersonating him. Elena confronts him. A huge fight ensues, ultimately defeating him. She quickly flags down a car and drives towards the airport. Meanwhile, Mateo and Ethan are struggling to dispose of Ethan's superior's body when the traveler issues a chilling order to Mateo. He must kill Ethan. A violent fight ensues between the two, and in the chaos, Mateo accidentally shoots himself. As he lies there, fatally wounded, he tearfully apologizes for his actions before dying. Desperate, Ethan quickly grabs Mateo's phone and attempts to call Nora, but she doesn't pick up. He then messages one of his colleagues, urgently warning him that Nora is in grave danger and to be on the lookout for a white van. Ethan hatches a plan to swap the carry-on bag with the regular bag, allowing him a chance to access the weapon inside if it is in regular bag, which essentially needs to be put in the cargo area. The carry-on bag, on the other hand, will give the traveler constant access to, would otherwise make it impossible for Ethan to retrieve the weapon. Meanwhile, the traveler enters the sorting area, retrieves his bag, and casually leaves. The traveler enters a flight to Washington, D.C. As expected, the carry-on didn't fit. The attendant takes the bag, and it eventually gets scanned. Nora and Ethan finds out which plane the traveler is in. Ethan advises Nora that the only way to prevent a catastrophe is to let the plane take off. He explains that he knows how to defuse the weapon, and he needs to get into the cargo area. However, for his plan to work, the plane must take off. He urges her to find Detective Elena and inform her of the situation, hoping it will help avert disaster. Meanwhile, Elena receives a call from her colleague, who has discovered crucial information. It turns out that a Congresswoman, Grace, is set to travel to Washington, D.C. to push for a controversial bill, but she had registered under a different name for safety purposes. As the officer digs deeper, they realize the grand plan orchestrated by the traveler. The Congresswoman is attempting to pass a bill that would greatly benefit weapons manufacturers, but it's struggling to gain enough support, especially from certain factions. The bill specifically targets Russian interests, and the traveler's plot hinges on framing the Russians for an attack. The weapon aboard the plane is the key. By making it appear as though the Russians are responsible for the attack, it will rally public and political support for the bill, ensuring its passage. Ethan sneaks into the plane's cargo hold, where he's able to get closer to the weapon. Nora explains the situation to Elena, and she gives an all-clearance for the flight takeoff. As the plane finally takes off, Ethan races against time to reach the weapon and neutralize it. The traveler, alerted to Ethan's intentions, is notified of the potential threat. A fight breaks out between them, with Ethan narrowly managing to surprise the traveler. In a final, desperate move, Ethan grabs the weapon and locks the traveler in the cargo fridge, where he eventually succumbs to the cold and his own plans unravel. Detective Elena, impressed by his resourcefulness and bravery, offers him a job as a police officer. Ethan, though reluctant at first, accepts, eager to use his skills for good. Fast forward to a year later, Ethan is living a fulfilling life. He's happily settled with Nora, raising their child together. Ethan and Jason, who once stood on opposite sides, have patched things up and mended their friendship. And with that, the story ends.